Okay, welcome everybody. This is our Community and Aging and Disability Conference webinar series. And today we're gonna talk about the many faces of depression and how to find relief. And we know that social and emotional well-being is a critical topic these days, particularly with COVID-19 and people working to socially or physically distance. So we thought this was an important topic, and we have a couple of really great speakers. So a little bit of housekeeping for today. The webinar is being recorded. That recording will be available on our website, and we'll also send out slides and the recording to all registered participants today. For questions and comments, you're going to go ahead and type those either in the Q&A or in the chat. Preferably questions for the speakers to answer, put those in the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring that and getting those questions to our speakers today. And if you have comments or things you might want to share, the chat is a good place for that. And you can talk to just the participants or the panelists or both. So. In order to access captioning, if that's something that you need, you're going to want to go to the bottom of your screen and you'll see a CC closed captioning button there, and you can turn that on. We have closed captions today. We are presenting in gallery view, so you don't need to pin interpreters. If you're using interpreters, you'll be able to see anyone whose camera is on, so those interpreters will show up automatically. There is a slide bar in between the slides that we're sharing and the presenters the video of the presenters. So you can move that slide bar back and forth, left and right, to enlarge either the presenters or the slides, depending on your needs for the day. If accessing the question and answer or the chat is a challenge for disability related needs, as an accommodation, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and we can unmute you to have you state your question aloud. So that's another option, but we'd like to reserve that for folks who have disabilities and need it for that reason. Okay, I think that is everything for our housekeeping today. So I'm Carly Pacheco. I'm the Deputy Director at Freed. Welcome. We've been doing this series for a couple of months now. We're finishing up our social, we're in the middle of our social and emotional well-being piece of it. And we'll talk a little bit more at the end of this about what's coming up in this series of webinars. But we do always like to go over what an ADRC is and kind of just give people a picture of the organization that is putting this series on. So we are being produced by the ADRC of Nevada, Yuba, and Sutter counties. And ADRCs really serve as consumer-directed resources for long-term services and supports. So people of all ages, disabilities, and income levels being able to connect to the services that they need to live, work, and play the way they want to live, work, and play. We utilize a no wrong door approach. So the idea is that we can make access to information as seamless and easy as possible for people. We know that these systems are complex. And we work to bring existing resources together to provide objective information about the options that are available and empower everyone to make the best decision for themselves. Okay, I think we're ready. So today we have two great speakers from the Falls Prevention Coalition of Nevada County. And they're going to talk about the many faces of depression and how to find relief. So I'd like to introduce Anastacia Knight. Anastacia is a master's level social worker who has proudly supported community members since 1996 in a variety of settings, including foster care adoption, child abuse prevention, and mental health. Currently, she's the program coordinator for the Nevada County Social Outreach Program, offering assessment, support, and referrals to homebound seniors and people with disabilities who may be challenged with loneliness, depression, risks, or symptoms, as well as other concerns or needs. Anastacia is a member of the Falls Prevention Coalition. She lives in Grass Valley with her husband and young Greyhound mixed dog and enjoys part-time caretaking of her 3-year-old grandson who keeps her on her toes. So welcome, Anastacia, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Hi. Thank you so much, Carly, and welcome to everyone that's joining us today. It's so good to be here. As I was saying to my esteemed colleagues earlier, this is the first Zoom presentation I've done on this topic, so I hope you'll bear with me. And I will try and speak slowly, and it's difficult not seeing all your faces, so I'm just going to be imagining all of your wonderful, smiling, and interesting faces out there joining me today. If you have questions, I think Carly already mentioned how to ask those, so I'm open to those as we go along. And next slide, please, Carly. So I wanted to make, as Carly mentioned, I am a member of the Falls Prevention Coalition. And I just wanted to start this by, we developed this originally for the Falls Prevention Coalition to do this presentation on depression. And, you know, what the heck does falls prevention and depression have to do with each other? So I just wanted to start framing that in. And so for the falls issue, injuries from falls are the #1 reason older adults visit the emergency room. And falls lead to more non-fatal injury in older adults than anything else. That's huge. And this is the piece that connects those together. Depression is one of the #1 factors in increased fall risk. I did not know this early on until we started discussing this in the Falls Prevention Coalition. I think this is really important information for us to know, to sort of frame in one of the many reasons why we may want to screen for depression, look for depression, or treat depression if it does show up. There's a lot of factors, and one is the increased fall risk. Next slide, please. If left untreated, if it's depression that's not getting any support or treatment, it can lead to a sedentary lifestyle, result in low nutrition levels because of appetite changes. Your gait can actually change, and that can obviously increase falls with that gait change. There's a lack of awareness about your surroundings if you're struggling with depression symptoms. There's a bit of a brain fog or disconnection from things around you. You're not paying as much attention. And the lack of concentration also folds into that. So those things resulting from depression can all lead to challenges with falls. And so that we really want to try to prevent those by addressing the depression symptoms, as well as for many other reasons we will discuss as we go along. But I wanted to frame in the falls piece first before we go forward. Next slide, please, Carly. This is a huge one. The stigma of talking about depression. We've gone back and forth, as I was mentioning to Carly earlier. Do we even use depression in this title? Is anyone going to be interested? Is it going to scare people away? There's a huge stigma about talking about any mental health, but depression. In the past, and this affects older adults often more than people of the younger generations because things are changing, but symptoms were often seen as a character weakness, a lack of fortitude, an inability to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just fix it yourself. Maybe the idea, oh, you just can't cope with your own life, you're not strong enough. The effects of this were really devastating because people were stuck in silence and they were not getting help or support. And then those symptoms can continue to go in cycles and get worse and worse, and it can affect many other aspects of our life. We discussed falls, but there's many other things that we'll talk about as we go forward. Stigma is one of the main reasons why people don't seek help. And we'll talk more about the statistics about actually how many people seek help that may have symptoms, which unfortunately isn't as high as we would like. And we're hoping that will change as we move forward and aren't scared of saying the word depression or being open and talking about it. So again, I'm grateful that you're here today to listen to this message and hear the word and get some more information that might help you or loved ones or neighbors, community members. So thank you. Next slide, please. So as I said, times are changing. Stigma is being reduced. There's a lot more discussion about it. People feel more open about it. Younger generations particularly have been raised where some of those ideas have changed to some degree. So that public awareness, there's a lot of things happening. Priya Kanal presented a couple of weeks ago for this series, and you can locate that recording if you would like to see it. We have a Let's Talk Nevada County that addresses these challenges and ways that you can seek help and support through that program and through the county website and the many resources. Treatment's becoming more acceptable. It used to be, oh, I'm seeing a therapist, or something like that was seen as, oh, you're crazy, or what a strange thing, or you wouldn't want to mention it to anyone. Now, again, as it's changing faster in the younger generations, people more openly talk about those things. It's much more common for people to have that support in their life. So this stigma, because of those many reasons, is rapidly declining. And I'm grateful for that, because more people can get the help that they need. You know, research is telling us, and as we find out more and more as they explore this, depression is really a result of interactions between our environment, life events that happen, and our brain function. And it's really no different than other medical conditions. If we had high blood pressure or high cholesterol or heart disease or, you know, arthritis or other challenging, you know, possibly challenging physical symptoms or medical conditions, those aren't our fault. And depression's not our fault either. It's very similar to the medical condition. So as the stigma changes, we're learning these things, and we're trying to educate people and hope that that message will get out there and more people can seek help and support when they need it. Next slide, Carly. Just some facts about depression to kind of normalize what's going on for people. This is at least in our country, and I think it's similar in similar countries. And this is from 2017. They lag a little bit behind in the statistical world. But in 2017, 17.3 million American adults, which was 7.1%, experienced depression each year. That's a lot of people. If you're experiencing symptoms of depression, you are not alone. This is not uncommon. Because of COVID, as Carly mentioned earlier, that's one of the reasons that this feature that we're putting together is especially pertinent. The statistics have shown alarming growth in people with depression and depression symptoms. They're showing up to 30% or more of our adult population are experiencing depression because of all the changes and uncertainty and fears that are happening right now, in part due to COVID. And as well as social isolation and loneliness, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when I mentioned seeking help, how stigma keeps people from seeking help, between 10% and 33% of people actually seek help that have a level of depression or depression symptoms. That's fairly low still, and we would like to see people get relief from this and have more people understand what it is when they're seeing it and be able to reach out for help and know what kind of help is out there. Older adults are the people that are on the lowest end of seeking help, again, because partly that stigma has been around for a long time and they're reluctant to do so. Also, many of the issues that older adults are dealing with, and also some people with disabilities, it doesn't get teased apart often between their physical and mental health. And so people may be thinking it's just related to maybe physical health issues, the symptoms they're experiencing. And it very well may not be. They can be both there together, and both need to be treated if they are there. This increased depression is really a significant public health issue. And again, California just passed some law for parity for insurance companies that have to treat mental health issues on the same level that they treat physical health issues. So hopefully more care and more support and reduced stigma will come out of those types of movements, as well as just coming here and listening and talking and getting the information and sharing it with others. So thanks for being part of that. Next slide, Carly. As I mentioned, and as Carly mentioned, the isolation and loneliness, this is huge now. We've been told to socially distance, stay at home as much as possible. Many things are closed. This is creating a huge public health issue with isolation and loneliness. That contributes to higher depression outcomes. The reason that the social outreach program was developed to support mental health in our community is specifically targeted to adults that may, because they're older adults and may have mobility or other health issues that keep them primarily at home, or people experiencing disabilities that also may have those conditions in place, and recognizing that isolation and loneliness can lead to depression. So I think the word social distancing, that's sort of a pet peeve of mine, really should be considered physical distancing. We need to stay safe and follow the guidelines, but we need to be creative about the ways that we can still be social. Humans are social creatures. We need connections. We need to co-regulate with others. That helps us calm our nervous system and have our heart and our soul be connected and our mind and body be connected to others. That may be by the phone or many other, again, creative ways that we can come up with. Even Zoom calls, not perfect, but at least there's some connection there. Not completely staying away from social connection and not being isolated. And at the end, we'll talk about a few, resources available and things like that. One of the things that as far as that lack of connection, as an example, solitary confinement in prison is a punishment because it cuts you off from other humans. That is not what we want to do with our with our community and our friends and our loved ones and our neighbors. We want to address that as much as possible. It literally affects our health and our life and our happiness, as well as our ability to live longer lives. One study found that loneliness, isolation is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's how it affects our health. I thought that was a really alarming statistic and study. It can also contribute to our physical health decline. It can contribute to dementia and Alzheimer's, heart disease, weakened immune systems, and many other health impacts. I always put my fingers together like this. They're very intermarried, our mental health and our physical health, and they can absolutely affect each other. And again, that's why we need to look at both and treating both if those factors are both there. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the symptoms of depression. What are we looking for? What are we looking at? What might we recognize in ourselves or our family members or our neighbors or friends? So these are just some symptoms. You don't have to check them all off to be considered depressed, but there are concerning things to look out for. And really a big factor when you're looking at this, I know when I look up like WebMD for something, it feels like, oh, everything applies to me. And you could really send yourself for a loop on that. But the fact is really things that are sort of significantly different for a person. Like maybe their normal baseline is one way, but you see some changes in some of these areas. And those are things to look out for. So if there's a couple of different areas, maybe not one, but 2, 3 or more that are coming into line with these ideas, that might be something to talk to someone or to look for support for yourself in that case. So a decreased interest or enjoyment of activities, that is a big one. Being bothered by little interest or pleasure in doing things. You just don't feel like doing any of the things you could. Not that there's things that you can't do because of COVID, but things that, maybe you enjoyed getting out in your yard and doing things and you're physically able to do that, but you just don't want to. And you've stopped doing those things, or people that you normally have a regular connection with, you've just pulled back from that. You've stopped connecting with them. A change in appetite or weight. This could be overeating a lot and gaining weight. It could be really not being hungry and not eating very much, and just doesn't sound good. Your stomach is upset, doesn't feel good. Sleep problems. Again, it could go either way. Insomnia, can't sleep, it's really difficult. Or oversleeping, sleeping a lot, being really tired. Again, and this is a change in what's sort of typical or normal for a person when you start seeing these symptoms. Low energy, low mood, and sadness. Those things coming up frequently, and people saying things or noticing that with yourself or friends or family. Thoughts of worthlessness, guilt, or hopelessness. I always say this is always one of those keys when someone tells me that I think, oh, depression maybe. I always say it lies to us. It's those things come into our head. We're worthless. you know, our family doesn't care about us, or no one cares about us. I feel guilty. I'm not a good person. I've done terrible things. I just don't have any hope. Anything can get better. So if you're hearing those in your own head or hearing those from other people in your community or in your life, you know, those are signals that you would perk up to and think, let's look at some of these other things and see if this could be depression, so that maybe a conversation could be had. Poor memory and frequent indecision. Depression symptoms cause sort of a brain fog and difficulty sort of processing. Unfortunately, sometimes for older adults, that's a symptom that gets missed because that, or even with other disabilities that people may have, that may be sort of part of things. They think, oh, I'm just getting older, or I just have this other thing going on that's causing that. But that actually could be a symptom of depression. Anxiety and depression are often intermarried, which is really hard because anxiety can make you have anxiousness and nervousness and all this, and depression can make you feel like I don't care and I'm going to withdraw and I'm not motivated. And then together, those are very difficult to manage. But anxiety can also look like irritability, kind of angry, easy to set off. Those things that could easily be missed also. Difficulty concentrating. Like maybe people used to be able to, you know, enjoy reading books or doing crossword puzzles, or, you know, things that took a little bit of concentration, following, you know, maybe a series on TV that had some, you know, challenging plot lines. And they're just having a hard time focusing on doing that. That's a red flag. And again, for older adults, this often gets looked at as like, oh, I'm just losing a little bit of my memory, it's normal, or a little bit of concentration, it's normal. It may not be. It may be something to look at. So having that be that little flag to think, are any of these other things happening? Then thoughts of death or suicide. That's a difficult topic to talk about, but depression can lead to suicide and thoughts of death or suicide. So it's very serious. If people are untreated for depression, it can lead to suicide and thoughts of death. So, you know, really looking out for what that might look like for people. We tend to not want to ask that question because we're afraid it's going to make it worse for them or cause them to do something to harm themselves. But they found, in fact, that is not true. Talking with someone or asking someone questions about, have you thought about killing yourself? Having that direct conversation, as hard as it is, actually gives someone an opening often to find relief and get support and find appropriate resources, and can prevent something as sad as that from happening. So for people that might be thinking about that, they might be kind of saying things that are off for them. They might actually be talking about wanting to die or suicide, or just seemingly feeling hopeless and trapped. Sometimes they give away possessions and things like that. That might be a factor, or putting affairs in order in a way that seems sort of not normal. We all want to do that at some point, but it seems to be either sudden or desperate in a way. Reckless behavior, a lot of anger, sometimes increased alcohol and drug use can come from that. Withdrawal, again, anxiety or agitation, you know, no sense of purpose. So when you're kind of seeing some of these symptoms and they seem to be going to the more extreme end, or you're hearing some of these things that could trigger that, it's good to have that conversation with them. I know it's a scary topic and we don't ever want that to happen, but it's good to have the knowledge. Our local county, Nevada County Mental Health, and you could probably get information through Let's Talk Nevada County, does have suicide prevention coordinator. They often put on trainings like Know the Signs and other mental health trainings for people if you want more information on what to look for and how to possibly help if you have someone in your life that's experiencing that. And we'll talk more about some resources towards the end too that you could use in that case as well. Next slide, please. So just a quick, like, how severe is my depression? You know, looking at 3 levels. And the importance of this is just where you might want to start with interventions or what might make you feel better. So if you have some of those symptoms we talked about and they're fairly mild, so you have some of them and it takes a little bit more effort than normal to do your day-to-day life or the things that you need to do, you know, you might have some mild symptoms. That would be the case where when we talk about some of the things you can do, there might be some things you could do yourself to help alleviate that. That might be on, you know, a lower level. Once we're getting into moderate symptoms, you might have many of the symptoms that we had mentioned, and they often keep you from being able to accomplish what you need to do in your life. It's getting to be a bigger barrier. And then with severe, most of the symptoms or a lot of the symptoms, and they almost always keep you from accomplishing what you need to do in your life. And when we're getting more into that moderate and severe level, that's where when we talk about things we can use for treatment and support, personally for me, I would be recommending people seek out higher levels of care or support rather than trying to maybe do it on their own. So it doesn't get too significantly serious for them, and we can change the course of that. So noticing them early is great. If you're, again, knowing what those are and you're cueing into those, and you can offer support or resources or ideas or direct people to places where those exist, you know, you can prevent or get some early support in there, and that can prevent going down into moderate or severe symptoms or, you know, suicidal thoughts or those kinds of things. So being aware of that can help it from getting worse. Next slide, please. So what can make you feel this way? What in the world even causes this? You know, why do some people have depression? I love the first one, stress. Has anyone out there, I know you can't answer me, but experiencing additional stress now? This is why our rates of depression have gone up to like almost 30% or sometimes more in some cases. You know, we all have some level of stress in our lives, you know, things that might be challenging at different points in our life, relationships or finances or, you know, unexpected things that happen. But, you know, longstanding or extreme stressors or difficult life changes or circumstances that come upon us, those are happening. Well, on top of what we normally have in our lives, we have this next layer. We have COVID. We have worry about health, friends and family members. We have, you know, restrictions or changes in our life and how we can live them and where we can go and what we can do. We have a lot of uncertainty. When is that going to change? When are things going to get better? When is this not going to be our day-to-day lives? There's a lot of political and social upheaval right now, you know, not necessarily directly related to that, but we're in election year. There's a lot going on no matter what side of the fence you're on. A lot of people are experiencing extreme stress around that. So we have these things layering up on whatever are typical things that we may have for stressors. So those can cause depression. Losses and traumas, early loss and trauma. If we look back to childhood, you know, abuse, neglect, loss of a parent early on, parents that had drug or alcohol addiction issues. There was a great study out of Kaiser called the ACE study, and they have 10 different factors that they rated people on. And the higher people rate, the more likely it is for them to have physical health issues as well as mental health issues. So we find that those early life losses and traumas can really experience to things that we may be challenged with in our lives. But then also current losses and traumas, of course, that's going to bring up a lot of stressors and, you know, grief and other factors that could affect our well-being and our life. And those can lead to depression as well. Medical problems can be linked to mood disturbances. So for example, some things that can sort of cause depression or depression-like symptoms might be thyroid hormone imbalances. Lack of B12, a B12 vitamin, if you do not, for some reason your body's not processing that, you're not getting that enough, you can end up with severe depression symptoms, and it's actually related to that lack of B12. Heart disease can also cause depression symptoms. There's a whole list, cancer, MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Huntington's, stroke, immune diseases, HIV, hepatitis, hormonal imbalances. So these are things, that's why it's always important to talk to your doctor about your symptoms, because there may be some things you can rule out, and the treatment of those things may support your mood and may reduce those depression symptoms. And you may not need direct treatment for depression if it is, in fact, those medical problems that are causing some of those factors. Seasons, oh yes. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of seasonal affective disorder, but that particularly often in the winter with less light, not having that vitamin D coming into our body can have people start to have depression symptoms or be diagnosed with depression during those seasons. So that's something to look out for in the winter, getting as much vitamin D. Some people do the light boxes if they tend to be prone to that. That can be helpful. Just being aware that it can happen seasonally, and that impacts the brain. Some medications can actually cause depression symptoms if you read those long lists they give you about side effects and possible interactions. It could be just as, I don't think it's simple, but it could be just a medication you're taking is causing some of those depression symptoms. So talking with your doctor or your pharmacist if you're experiencing that, and have them review your medications to see if some of those symptoms could be actually being caused by medication and if some adjustment would be helpful. Our brain function, that's a huge one. You know, we have many regions in our brain, and there's some responsible for emotions and mood, our limbic system, our amygdala. They can become overreactive or under-responsive over time, especially if there's the early losses and traumas or current losses and traumas or high levels of stress. And these are based on experience, and it can just kind of get stuck in overdrive or stuck in a fight or flight sort of space, and that can cause some of those problems. I mean, the good news about issues with our brain that I think they're discovering more and more all the time, but it's called neuroplasticity. Our brains can change. We used to think, oh, if this was what's going on with you, you know, you're kind of stuck there, too bad, there's nothing you can do. Well, we're finding there's things we can do to change our brains for the better. It does take some time and it does take some effort, but it's absolutely possible. So if you are having some brain function issues, there are ways that you can change your brain and do things differently so that you can alleviate some of those symptoms. So it's not hopeless. Family genetics. Making sure I've lost my slides.
I'm so sorry. That is my technical issue. I'm resharing right now. I apologize, everybody. Sorry, Anastacia.
No problem. I don't have any like Girl from Ipanema pause music. I'm sorry. Family genetics and history. I just want to mention that with the brain function issue. Mental health issues, depression, anxiety, other mental health issues can run in families, and genes can account for between 1/3 and 2/3 of risk for those things. Oftentimes there's the risk. It doesn't mean you'll get it, but if life circumstances happen or other things happen, that could trigger that to come up for you as a challenge. So it's good to know if you have family members that have had challenges, you know, that you are more at risk for that, and to be, you know, aware and watching out for any symptoms and being proactive about getting support and help. Next slide, please. Risk factors that can result in depression. And these are often sort of the overall picture in life. If you look at the list here, and we'll go through them one by one, but they happen to many of them happen to everyone. And it's really about things that are out of our control. But again, can set the stage for depression, whether we have those early risk factors or, you know, it's just something that leads into that for us for many reasons. So bereavement, huge, grief and loss. You know, and extended, you know, really maybe unexpected losses, loss of people you wouldn't expect, like a child, or, you know, maybe even a spouse that's younger or healthier than you, friends that, you know, seemed fine, accidents, emergencies, disasters. Those are often more challenging and can lead to longer stages of grief and more possibility of leading in depression. Expected losses are always hard. I'm not dismissing that at all. But, you know, as a society, we sort of expect our parents will pass before us, or older people will go before us, or, you know, maybe people with chronic diseases that are serious, that we know that there's a timeline on that, will go before us. Not that they're easy to deal with, but the unexpected losses are always more challenging. Basically ignoring or pretending that you're okay doesn't really work. You have to, you know, tell yourself the truth and be open to accepting or seeking help in those times. Feeling hopeless, that's just such a, like I said, one of those key words or factors for depression, whether that's the COVID issue, political, social issues, factors in your life. Getting to the point of feeling hopeless can really get stuck in a cycle that leads us to depression. Physical illness, again, people with disabilities or older adults that may have, you know, ongoing physical illness issues, takes a lot of coping to deal with those things and can be overwhelming. And, you know, looking at that long term can cause going back to feelings of hopelessness. Challenges that can lead to a sense of depression as well, and some of those symptoms that we discussed earlier. Pain and long illness sort of folds into physical illness with that extended time of that. Lack of autonomy and control. Maybe your disability or your age has caused your driver's license to be taken away. That's a huge one for a lot of people that I interact with. Being able to jump in your car and go where you want, when you want. And that can lead to the isolation and loneliness and the other factors we talked about. So there could be many, many ways being, needing to go live in a nursing home or care situation where you have people making some decisions about your life for you. Is that lack of autonomy and control can be very challenging for people and can lead to a sense of depression and hopelessness. Functional capacity, having again, any maybe traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, dementia, any other functional capacity issues leads to a lot of these things, maybe feeling hopeless, bereavement because you've lost things of your own functioning. Maybe other people are starting to make decisions or take control of things that you would prefer they did not, that you had that control. Those things can lead to depression. Alcohol and drug use. It's kind of, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Sometimes people have alcohol and drug issues and then using those lead to depression. Alcohol is a depressant. Many people say, oh, I have some drinks, I feel a little bit better. But the overall effect on your system is a depressant over time. Or drug use, again, that can cause a lot of physical issues and mental health issues. Your brain is just not at peak functioning if you're using drugs on any level. But also at the same time, people that might not have abused them or used them often, if they're experiencing depression or hopelessness, or maybe even some of these risk factors of illness or loss of autonomy, they might start using those more and more. So you might see people with symptoms of depression or some of these risk factors start going down that road. It's important to think about that. You can definitely exacerbate your medical conditions. Injuries can happen. Speaking of falls, that's a big cause of falls as well. It can affect your medications so that they don't work well or they cause other negative side effects. The recommendations, I don't think many people know, like what do they recommend? For people over 65, for women, they say 3 drinks in one day or 7 drinks a week. Or for men that are over 65, 4 in one day or 14 drinks a week. And that's for maybe someone that's not taking medications or doesn't have any other physical health issues that could be caused problematic by alcohol. And then, oh, I'm sorry, that was for under 65. I'm sorry, correct that. That's for younger people. The people over 65 don't drink 3 drinks in one day or 4 drinks in one day. Reverse that. That's for people under 65. Men and women over 65, no more than 3 drinks a day or 7 a week. And so for some people, they're surprised by those guidelines. And again, those are more for people that might not have medication or other pre-existing conditions or existing depression, would suggest cutting back on that or trying to eliminate the use of that for your health. We talked a little bit about loneliness and isolation. That's a huge risk factor. Financial problems. COVID's also leading to a lot of concerns for people. People are losing jobs or investments or many other things that cause financial insecurity. Part of that's leading to a huge housing issue in this area with people from the Bay Area moving up here because they're allowed to work from home because of COVID. So it's much harder to find housing. And so that can be a huge financial stressor going on. And again, when we have these high levels of stress for a long period of time, our brain gets triggered in this constant fight or flight mode, which can lead to those depression symptoms and brain changes. Fear of dying. People with disabilities, older adults, that can be very common with health issues that are happening. What's going to happen? What's, my life expectancy? Could this thing, kill me? Am I going to die? Also happens to other people normally. It's a human fear. It's very normal. But if we get sort of obsessive about that or really spend a lot of time worrying about that, it can also get our brain stuck in that fight or flight mode and panic mode and can cause some brain changes and depression symptoms. So things that you can do, we'll talk about how we treat this. We're sort of saying all the depressing stuff up front, and then we'll talk about the hopefulness about what we can do to change things and how we can get help. I get the really exciting topic. I'm like, don't get too down. We're going to get there, I promise. Next slide, please. Just a quick note. A lot of times people put together grief and depression. They might be experiencing grief and they might want to label it depression, or someone else might. There's some differences that you can look out for in yourself and for loved ones and community members. With grief, feelings are often coming in waves. They're not continually present. And as time goes on, those waves go space out a little bit more. Feelings are mixed. You might have some happy, beautiful memories of the situation or the loved one. And then also painful and sad memories are coming up too often. People that are actually grieving usually keep their level of self-esteem. They're not getting those feelings like we talked about with depression, like worthlessness, feeling badly about themselves, hopelessness in those areas. And for grief, I always want to say, we're not just saying that a loved one died. Grief could be a loss of a job, a living situation, circumstances, something that you had hoped for, bodily functions. There's so many things that grief could apply for. I think our society often says, oh, it has to be something big, it has to be a death. But we can experience grief in a lot of different ways. Long-term extended grief or really significant, again, out of order, unexpected grief can lead us down the road to depression. So it's important to be aware and to pay attention to some of those symptoms we talked about earlier and how much they're impacting your life. Depression, on the other hand, the thoughts can be negative most of the time, doesn't come in waves in the same way. There's persistent feelings of low self-esteem, worthlessness. That's another key word that comes up for me with depression. Self-loathing, self-hatred. People might be better off without me. I can't do anything right. Those kinds of things are really the triggers that we would start thinking it's more depression than grief. And not that grief can't lead there, but grief is its own piece, and we don't want to make it a clinical issue because it's something we all experience at different levels in our life and different times, but just to be aware of that. Then there is ways to get support. There's no right way to grieve. Sometimes people say, well, it's been 3 days, you get 3 days off of work, so you should be okay. There can be prolonged grief or longer grief, and everyone does it differently, and that's okay. I want to normalize that. And you can get support. There's therapy you can get. There's grief groups. Our local hospice group has grief support for anyone. They don't have to have used their program. Talking with friends and family. Some people still talk to their loved ones, have maybe a shrine or an altar, or do things in their memory. So there's a lot of things you can do to stay connected if it is a loved one or someone that had passed, to help you work through that grief. Sometimes grief can be a loss of role or identity. Like maybe if you get divorced, your identity was a wife or husband or spouse, partner, and then when you lose that role, that can be a huge piece of grief. Or you were a caregiver and the person you were caregiving for passes or moves into another level of care and that role is gone. Retirement, that's a huge one for people. The role that you had in being a breadwinner or, your association with friends and family there, that can be a huge one too. So thinking of, not just the loss of a person, but many ways that grief could impact you. I'm going to take a sip of water here real quick. All right, next slide, please, Carly. All right, we've set all the baseline. We got all that stuff out of the way. What are my options for finding relief? We did promise this in the title. I just really wanted to set the understanding about what we were looking at, what to see in yourself and others. Let's talk about what we can do if we're experiencing those symptoms of depression at either a mild, moderate, or severe level. Especially if you're looking at moderate or severe level, although mild, you can also pursue this, and that is wonderful. Therapy with a counselor or a therapist. There's many, many options, and I'll talk a little bit later about the success of that and how to find a therapist in the next couple slides if you're interested. And antidepressant medication. You could always talk to your medical doctor. Often, many of them can prescribe some of the antidepressant medications, or you can get a referral or seek out a psychiatrist. They have more training and knowledge regarding that if you feel like it's a more complex issue, or your doctor is reluctant to support that or to do something that may not just be their typical few that they're most comfortable with. It does not mean you're crazy any more than if you were going to, say, physical therapy to support, your strength in your leg. We're just supporting the strength in our brain by seeking out some of these options. So those two together are very effective, or separately are very effective. There's some other ways that we can have control our own self, our autonomy to make our own choices and to do on our own. There's many supplements that could be helpful for some people, or they might be low in certain areas that could actually improve their depression symptoms or even make them go away. As we mentioned, sometimes medication's causing it, sometimes the lack of certain things are causing it. And Diane's going to talk more later in this presentation about brain health. So she'll give you some more info about this. And I always say, talk to your doctor first. That's my disclaimer. But things like omega-3 oils are really good for brain health and can help some people that have depression symptoms. SAMe is another supplement that often people use. Vitamin D, people can be low in and can cause some challenges and could help support those symptoms. St. John's wort is a natural herbal supplement that some people have found help with. And B12, again, if you are low in B12, that could cause the depression symptoms. And that alone sometimes has helped people come out of significant depression. That is really what they were lacking. And that's what those the depression symptoms were pointing to. So just thinking about, there's many ideas and supplements, talking to your doctor first. You don't want to take anything that's going to cause a particular problem for you, or the medications you're taking, or the health issues that you may be experiencing. And they may have additional suggestions. Diet's so important. If we eat the typical Western American diet, kind of high sugar, high salt, high fat, a lot of meat, that often is not the best for our brain health and can exacerbate symptoms of depression or lead to having some of those milder symptoms of depression. So less sweet, less salty, less fatty, more olive oil, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, and legumes. The Mediterranean diet, if you've ever heard of that, is often touted as one of those things that can be helpful for people. Exercise, movement, our body and our mind are so connected. It can be such a dirty word for people sometimes, like, oh, I have to exercise. Find things you like, just do a little bit if you can't do a lot. Sometimes people just say, I walk up and down my hall a few times with my walker a day. I just make a point of spending 5 minutes doing that. Every day, or walking down the hallway in their apartment building, or maybe around a small block that's accessible to them. Just make sort of a plan. Having an exercise buddy, a neighbor, a friend, a family member that, maybe even once or twice a week wants to take a short walk or do something with you could be helpful. Baby steps count. Like I said, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to take on a everyday 45-minute aerobic exercise tape. We don't want to set ourselves up for fail. That could be really overwhelming. Just walking, again, like I was mentioning, doing a class. A lot of classes are on Zoom now, that you can connect into and join in on things. Chair yoga is one that people that don't have a lot of mobility have been able to use. Any kind of movement. Soup cans, just doing some lifts with some soup cans, and making a point of doing that once a day or every few days, that movement can help. 3 to 5 times a week, so even aiming for 3 days a week of doing something could really improve your mood and be helpful. Expressive writing. So I don't know how many people are journalers or writers, but if you get any kind of a notebook and you write something, that can be helpful. Usually, if there's a really big event that happened, you might want to wait a little bit of time so it's not overwhelming, like 1 or 2 months. But after that, if there's things, you can really process a lot by just kind of writing it out, not editing yourself, just getting it all out on paper. It can really help you express things. Social interaction programs, getting engaged in something. We talk about some resources like the phone reassurance program in a few minutes. Calling friends and family, I know that's really difficult right now because of our social distancing and which I would prefer to call physical distancing. but involved in anything you can like that. There are different things. Next week, I believe Carly said there's going to be a discussion for the ADRC about ways to stay engaged and get involved. That might be online or virtual. So that might be a way to stimulate that and get involved. Forgiveness. I always think forgiveness of ourselves is one of the biggest ones. We often hold so many grudges of ourselves. But forgiveness of ourselves is big. Forgiveness of others, for those that we can. Having gratitude. Many of the research in positive psychology, if you just list a few things every day that you're grateful for, and they could be very simple. This meal, the fact that I had a bed to sleep in, or that I have this friend, or that I, it's a beautiful day out. It can be very simple, but our brain, actually, when I said our brain can change, that's one of the ways that can change our brain, is having those gratitude thoughts. A positive focus. I mentioned self-compassion or self-forgiveness, like treating yourself like you would a friend. What would I tell a friend right now? Would I tell them, oh, you're stupid. Why did you do that wrong? Or why can't you get it together, or pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Most likely we wouldn't. We would have compassion for them. Think of talking to yourself in that same way and having that self-compassion. So that's an important one. Meditation, people talk about meditation a lot. That actually does change the brain. They've done a lot of scans and things on that. I've had people tell me, like, I'm not very good at it. I can't sit there very long. My brain is jumping all over the place. Well, that's what brains do. Even meditators that have meditated for years, that's what their brains do. The practice of it is just realizing it and coming back to your focus, whether that's your breath, whether that's a repeated word, whether that's walking meditation, just paying attention to where your feet are going, those kinds of things. Being in nature is sort of another meditative practice. They do in Japan, a big thing is forest bathing, going into the forest, into the quiet. If you have any access to somewhere like that, even a tree in your backyard, and sitting there for a few minutes. Focusing on the present moment. Sometimes with depression and anxiety, we're thinking far ahead and being anxious about it, or we're thinking of things that happened in the past and being depressed about them. And if we just stay right here, right now, we can be okay. We're safe in the moment. So that's a good thing to remember. So some of these things are things we can do on our own, or have friends or family, join us in them. I often use YouTube meditations or hypnotherapy or chanting. If I want to, calm down or get focused, there's tons of things on there that you could look up. Just type in depression meditation or anxiety support or things like that. Those are great things that you can just listen to and find the ones that you like, that can be really helpful to keep you in a better state of mind. Mindfulness is one of the things that that is often talked about. Again, that's just staying in the present moment without any judgment of yourself or anything around you. Sounds easy on one hand, but it can be very difficult to do. Again, I personally like to be led with those through like the YouTube or other CDs or things like that, so that I can sort of stay focused on someone else's voice and not what keeps popping into my head. But different people have different ways of doing that. I have a 3-minute guided meditations script that's about mindfulness. Carly, do I have time to do that, or should we move forward?
We have just about 35 minutes left in the presentation. So you've probably, and we do have some questions that have come in.
Okay, so I will skip that, and I will encourage people to, look that up online or look that up on YouTube, and just mindfulness meditation and they've done a lot of research on it, be really helpful when you're having any kind of the challenges with depression symptoms or anxiety. So, okay, next slide, please. So a big question, people are often fearful of therapy. Does therapy work? I said we'd get back to this. What studies show us is that at least 75% of people have a positive benefit. And, if I was a betting person, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd think those are pretty good odds. Worth trying if you're having challenges and things are difficult. They have increased feelings of well-being, changes in behavior, positive changes in their brain and body. Often with just therapy alone, they can be the same as medication, antidepressant medication or other medications to treat the depression. Really, if you combine antidepressant medication and therapy, that gives you the highest level of chance of success. So if you're in that moderate to severe level, Those are the things that I would really be focusing and considering on, and then adding those other things in as you're feeling better and able to do so, because it really can be effective. And the therapist should work for you. Some people, you know, you get to direct that. You get to pick someone that you feel is going to work well. If you start therapy with someone and it just doesn't feel like a good fit and you don't feel like it's helpful, therapists know it's okay to find a different one or to find one that's a better fit for you. That's the important part, is the relationship that you have there and the trust that you can build there. So give it a try. Next slide. So if you're looking for a therapist, how in the world do I find one? That seems daunting. You can ask your doctor, your physician, or other healthcare providers. They can make referrals for you to therapists or even psychiatrists if you're looking at more medication support and management than they're willing to offer. Your friends, if you start the topic of conversation, you might find that your friends might have some good suggestions themselves, their family member, friends, daughters, sons might be seeing someone and they have some good ideas around that. You can call your insurance company. There's usually a number on the back of your insurance card, and you can ask for therapy. Who would be available in the community therapy that your insurance covers, and they will give you a list. You can look in our local senior resource guide. Often there's information about therapists that are advertising in those guides, and you could give them a call. If you're on the web, Psychology Today is a great resource. Even when I find someone, I often look there because it gives you sort of a picture and kind of talks about what their specialties are and their focus, gives you a little bit of feeling about them rather than just a name and a phone number. Medicare, you can go to the Medicare website also, which I listed there, which is medicare.gov /physician compare. And that can, if you put in therapists or psychotherapy, it'll give you a list within however many miles you choose that take Medicare insurance. You can also call the Nevada County 211 line, which if that doesn't work on your phone for some reason, it's 844-319-4119. For most people, just dialing 211 gets you straight there, and ask them if they have suggestions or resources for that. So there's many ways that you can get support in locating someone if you feel like that might be helpful for you. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is just a very few select local resources and services. There's a lot more available, but these are some that are frequently referred to or that are utilized. Freed has a phone reassurance program where they do social calls and check in with people and chat with people for a bit, just to give some social contact. If you're isolated and alone, that's a nice piece. They also have a friendly visitor program, which is unfortunately due to COVID, they're not going into people's homes, but they're offering some other support and resources like some senior food delivery and some other options through that. I always give clients that are 60 or over or people with disabilities the number for the friendship line. It is 1-800-971-0016. It's 24 hours a day and it's available. You don't have to be in a crisis. You can be lonely, you can be anxious, you can be sad, you can be having a difficult time. And there's always someone there that's a peer that can speak with you and talk with you through whatever you're going through. You don't have to be alone. I'm the social outreach coordinator, as we mentioned in the beginning. That's my program. And what I do, as I mentioned, is go out and do some assessments, well, by phone or occasionally in person. Do some assessments to see if you are experiencing depression and kind of what other things in your life are looking like that, and getting you connected to long-term supports and services, if that's a therapist or other community organizations that can help whatever it is that you want to be connected to with whatever it is you're experiencing. So that number is 274-6224. Again, I mentioned local therapists. They're a great local resource. We do have, for people that might be experiencing that more extensive level of depression or having any kind of suicidal thoughts, we do have a mental health urgent care center. It's at Sierra Nevada Memorial Hospital. If you're looking straight at the emergency room, it's right to the left in a building. And I think it's open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Where you can directly walk straight in there. If they are not open during those hours and you're having a crisis any other hours, you can call 911, or you can go straight to the emergency room as well, and they will support that and find you the best support and resources at the time to keep you safe and get you care. We do have a local Nevada County crisis line that's also 24 hours if you're having a mental health crisis or a family member or friend is having a mental health crisis. You can call 265-5811. They're a wonderful resource as well. And again, as I mentioned earlier, next week, Carly has someone coming to speak about other ways to stay engaged and social in the community that can be helpful. And also going back, Priya Kanal, I think 2 weeks ago, which should be recorded and on the website, did a whole part about Let's Talk Nevada County and mental health in Nevada County and local supports there also. So it'd be good to go back and watch that and to check that out as well, because I think there'll be additional resources there. Next slide, or is that my last slide? Oh, questions, okay.
Awesome, thank you, Anastacia. And just on what you were just saying, so Randy actually asked if it was possible to get a link to last week's presentation, which was staying connected and maintaining a sense of purpose. We did just check, the link is not up yet, but it should be up imminently, I would say by Monday. Probably that will be up on our website. It's just getting the work done. So I apologize about that, but look for that coming. And then just as a quick aside, a few people asked if you might put the link to the mindfulness meditation that you spoke about in the chat box. So maybe
one, I had it written out, but I'll see if I can find a simple one and put it in there.
Awesome. So, and then we have a few questions. So Valerie said, we have a program with volunteers who support aging adults that are not care providers, but it can be hard for us to distinguish between loneliness and depression. We're cautious that we may read more into the situation and are afraid to jump to a conclusion.
Yeah, it can be tricky, absolutely. And again, kind of reviewing those symptoms of depression that we talked about earlier to see, is there a couple of those that are popping out? Maybe not one, sometimes people may overeat or undereat, or sometimes people have sleep problems. And if that's sort of standing alone, there's less concern. But if several of those symptoms seem to be present, they might be heading in that direction, and it might be time to maybe breach that conversation. If it's local to Nevada County and they're a disabled person or they're 60 or over, a referral to my program could be made. And I have that discussion and we do a depression screen and just talk about it. Giving them a resource like the friendship line too could be just like, hey, if you're ever feeling anxious or lonely or needing support, this line's always there, or educating them. Sometimes when people are lonely and isolated, that can lead to depression. And I'm a little bit worried about you because I can tell you're lonely and isolated. And, is there something we could do to help, or ways that we can get you connected to help?
Great. Jana was wondering if you think there will be some created in-person opportunities for social interaction that might be able to follow the health guidelines. So she noted that there are a lot of online opportunities, but access to technology and the internet is still an issue for lots of people.
I agree. That is one of the biggest challenges now. Some ways that people are doing that, again, some people are forming pods where they're not associating with anyone else, but they're maybe having a neighbor or one group of family members that are being very cautious and not associating with people and using all the safety precautions, but then those people associate with each other only. So that's a creative way people have found. Meeting outside and staying 6 feet away and wearing masks. There's a lot of downtown Grass Valley and Nevada City have big open seating areas where they've blocked off the cars, where people could meet under those circumstances and talk. Those are some, a lot of things are closed right now. We're hoping, as this goes on with the uncertainty, we don't know as things change. I always think, gosh, it'd be nice to go to the movies or to, do something like that. And those are just really difficult right now. But there's ways to be safe and to do some in-person things. Again, if you wear masks or outside or, standing apart or trying to give some distance, but still being together. I've gone and ate, doing those things, staying 6 feet away from someone at an outdoor restaurant, and it's felt fairly safe. It just depends on each person's comfort level. But there are ways to try to get together and to stay safe, sit outside on a porch, wear masks, those kinds of things, meet somewhere where you can do those things in nature, take a walk, but give some distance, things like that.
Great. And then Jana also was wondering if you have an idea of what a typical or average copay might be for therapy for older adults with regular Medicare.
If people with Medicare have a secondary insurance, they usually pay nothing to very little. If they don't have a secondary insurance, I think typically it's 20%. So that would depend on what the therapist charges. It's not always a standard rate. And there are also some programs, for example, I'll mention this, A New Day in our community, which is supported by the Twin Cities Church. They do have peer counselors that are supervised by a licensed therapist, and they do free counseling and support there. And their counselors that are licensed also do sliding scale. So there's a few options if that is a barrier for you in our community.
Great. And then there's also a note here, Sierra Foothills Village, which is a fairly new organization in our community and is a membership program. They provide some services as well and would help people connect to those services. So a little bit of information there. And then we've just got a couple folks who really have appreciated your presentation and are wondering if you might share your contact information again. So maybe again, while Diane is speaking in the chat, you might send out your contact info for folks.
I'd be happy to, yes.
Great, thank you. Oh, and I'm so sorry, we do have one person with their hand raised. So Nicolette, I've just asked you to unmute. So if you wanna state your question.
Oh, I didn't have a question, but I must have touched something the wrong way, but I did want to thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I very much enjoyed it. I do have, actually, you know what? I do have a question. I didn't even realize it. When the, what I've been doing is on my phone, I've been taking a photograph of each of these pages. It's a depression or dementia and all the other ones, but the script comes up sometimes and covers it. So I have to get in there right away to take a picture of it. But I understand that you're going to be sending us a tape that I can listen to again. And if you're putting up the sources, I can take photographs of that too. That would be great, because I belong to the California Council for the Blind, and I'm kind of their representative coming here today. And I'm going to transmit all this information to various chapters in the San Francisco Bay Area. So thank you so much. This is really wonderful. I also volunteer for an organization called COVIA, which used to be Senior Center Without Walls, and it's a program on the phone. And so we're not terribly concerned about people, but they are all elderly, more elderly than I. I'm 75, but some people are older than I am, and everybody's having a really difficult time. So I think it's really a good time to be talking about this and to be giving people resources. So again, I can't thank you enough for this. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Nicolette. Yeah, and thanks so much for sharing. And we'll be sending out the slides as well as the recording of today's session. So just give us a week or a week and a half to get that out to everybody, and then we'll be doing that. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to introduce now Diane Meisler. So Diane has been a nurse for 40 some years. She's worked in psych, ER, hospice, and public health. She currently works for Nevada County with the Senior Outreach Nurse Program, visiting vulnerable seniors at home to ensure they have the support that they need to avoid unwanted placement in facilities. Diane lives in Nevada City with her husband and a cute but yippy and marginally housebroken Chihuahua. I can relate to that. She enjoys gardening, writing, and bonding with her 3 above average grandchildren. And Diane is a member of the Falls Prevention Coalition of Nevada County. So thank you, Diane. Welcome.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Anastacia. I always learn something from you. I'm going to be talking about depression and dementia because the two overlap and sometimes can mimic each other. So I'll be talking about some, next slide, please. Normal brain aging versus dementia, some types and causes of dementia and depression and how to tell them apart, and lifestyle changes that help both and help everything in life, actually. Next slide. This is a short-term memory loss support group. He's saying, good evening. You're probably all wondering why you just walked into this room. I can relate. That happens to me when I open the refrigerator too. Next slide. What is normal? Normal memory changes can be not remembering conversations or events from some months ago. When you forget what happened that day, then you wonder about dementia. It's normal to forget names of acquaintances. It's not normal to forget names or not recognize family members. It's normal to occasionally forget appointments or lose things. It's not normal to frequently lose things and miss appointments, or to repeat yourself. There it is again, frequently losing things and missing appointments. It's normal to occasionally have trouble thinking of a word or a name. When you have frequent pauses substituting words that don't make sense, then that can be more cause for concern. It's normal to lose your keys from some time to time. It's not normal to forget how to work the car. And with normal memory loss, often you're worried, but your family isn't. With dementia, your family might be worried and you might not be aware that there's a problem. Next slide, please. Some memory loss is normal, but not inevitable, and I'll talk about how to stave that off. Next slide. Signs of dementia, when to worry, are advanced memory loss, not recognizing people, getting lost in familiar places, forgetting to turn off the faucet. I do that though. Impaired judgment, giving strangers money or going out without proper clothing, going out in your pajamas. Impaired language, not being able to form sentences or using the wrong words. Loss of the ability to perform familiar tasks like using appliances, getting dressed correctly, paying bills, taking medications, doing household chores. Illogical thinking or reasoning. If a lamp is broken, you want to take out the wall instead of changing the light bulb. And loss of coordination or motor functions can happen with some kinds of dementia. A diagnosis of dementia requires at least 2 of those. Next slide. Dementia isn't a specific disease. Instead, dementia describes a group of symptoms affecting memory, thinking, judgment, and social abilities, and affecting those severely enough to interfere with daily functioning. People often conflate Alzheimer's with dementia, but Alzheimer's is one type of dementia. There are quite a few types. Next slide. Types of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common, about 60 to 80% of dementia they estimate is from Alzheimer's. Vascular dementia, which is a result of compromised circulation to your brain, can be from mini strokes. It can also be just from chronic bad circulation, which often manifests in other things like heart disease or poor circulation in the legs. Traumatic brain injury. Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia are related, similar causes, but with Parkinson's, you tend to have mobility issues before dementia, which may or may not appear. With Lewy body, usually the mental status changes happen first and often include hallucinations. That's a hallmark of Lewy body. Alcoholism, if severe enough, can cause loss of short-term memory. And Creutzfeldt-Jakob, that's actually spelled with a C, is the human form of mad cow disease. It's very rare, but it can cause dementia. Next slide, please. Risk factors for dementia, you can see most of them are reversible. The ones that are not reversible are genetics. You may inherit a tendency for it, you may not. A history of brain injury, you can't change that. And past transgressions, you can't change what you've done in the past as far as alcohol or drug abuse, or lifestyle habits, but you can change them now going forward. The reversible causes are many: high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, inflammation. Those all tend to go together and tend to be lifestyle related. Sedentary lifestyle, speaking of which, sleep issues, smoking, alcohol abuse, medications. Some medications, especially medication interactions, can cause cognitive changes. Social isolation can cause depression and can also cause loss of cognitive function just because of lack of stimulation. Depression is often interrelated with dementia. Infection, especially urinary tract infections, can cause confusion, and that's a very reversible cause. Low thyroid and certain vitamin deficiencies, like Anastacia talked about. Next slide, please. Is it depression or is it dementia? They can look like each other sometimes. With depression, there are physical symptoms early on: fatigue and lack of motivation, moving more slowly. Pervasive negative thoughts happen with depression: excessive worry, feeling that life is pointless, loneliness or boredom, crying for no reason, decreased energy, and suicidal thoughts, which are more common with depression, pretty unusual with dementia. With dementia, you can see difficulty performing normal tasks, using the wrong words, like I said, confusion about time or place, not knowing where you are or what the date is, especially not knowing the month or the year or the season. Impaired judgment, memory loss. Dementia is more a gradual onset. It can be, people can think back and say, well, when did that really start? Did we have anything to worry about or not? Losing things is more common with dementia. Changes in thinking patterns or personality, and suicidal thoughts are uncommon with dementia. Next slide, please. Pseudodementia is symptoms of dementia that are actually caused by depression. People often with severe depression often are forgetful, move slowly. They have low motivation and mental slowing, kind of a mental fog. And that person may not appear depressed, but the syndrome responds well to treatment. With treatment, mood improves, energy returns, and concentration and intellectual functioning return. Next slide, please. There's no real test to tell the difference between depression or dementia. You can look at the symptoms, as I mentioned. But if the doctor is not certain, it's worth trying treatment for depression, and the results can be dramatic often with what you thought was dementia. But once depression is treated, that can turn around. Next slide, please. Lab results that can be pertinent if you're having memory changes are lipid panel, which is cholesterol, because cholesterol can affect circulation. Blood sugar and A1C. A1C is a 3-month average of your blood sugar. And chronic high blood sugar can inflame your blood vessels and cause circulatory compromise. C-reactive protein, or CRP, is a test for inflammation, also which can affect circulation. And then testosterone, thyroid, vitamin D and ferritin, which is a type of iron. All of those can cause cognitive changes if they're out of whack. Next slide, please. Here's an old couple sitting on a park bench saying, "Great heavens, you're right, it is her. You know, I remember when she used to be in focus." I know that feeling. So habits that help your brain, help with a healthy brain, they won't help with your vision necessarily, but they help with a lot of other health issues and with mood. These habits that I'll talk about shortly help with cardiovascular health and decrease your risk of stroke and heart attack. They help with high blood pressure, help with control diabetes, decrease fall risk, increase endurance, help control weight, and help decrease the risk of cancer. Next slide, please. Some things you can do to improve your brain health and decrease your risk of dementia and even turn it around sometimes. You can exercise your brain. Puzzles and games are great for this. Crossword puzzles, Sudoku, card games, Scrabble, anything that makes your brain stretch a little bit. Similarly, learning a new language or learning a musical instrument is a really new part of your brain for most people to use. And as Anastacia talked about, the brain is plastic. We have neuroplasticity, and if we use new parts of our brain, it can sometimes compensate for parts that are compromised. And just try to learn something new every day, develop a curiosity about the world and what's going on around you. Next slide, please. And exercise your body. Baby steps count, as Anastacia said. Don't be intimidated when you hear, oh, you have to exercise 5 days a week for 30 minutes. That's a great ideal, but you get points for doing more than you did yesterday and more than you did last week. If you tend to be sedentary and never go outside, just step outside your door, walk down the street. That alone, change of scene, can sometimes help with depression and also create more stimulation and help with dementia. Walk fast, age slow. The faster you walk when you're out walking, the more points you get for it. It increases your cardiovascular health more than walking at a leisurely pace. And you can do bursts of that. Walk at a leisurely pace and then walk fast or walk up hills, include some hills in your walk. You want your exercise to focus on 3 things: endurance, strength, and balance or coordination. Balance and coordination. So endurance is improved if you work up a sweat or get out of breath. You get some cardiovascular benefits from that. Strength exercises can be anything that makes your muscles stronger. Soup cans. You can do exercises in your chair. If you live in a recliner, do bicycling with your legs one at a time. You don't need weights. You can do any movement. And then balance and coordination especially helps with fall prevention. You can stand behind a sturdy chair, balance yourself on it while standing on first one foot and then on the other, just to get your balance muscles working. Or if you have a hallway, you can steady yourself on the walls and tightrope walk down the hallway. And get an exercise buddy. It makes a huge difference to have somebody that you know is waiting for you to take a walk with them. And that also is great for social contact and helps with isolation and loneliness too. Next slide. Other healthy brain habits. You want to cut down on or avoid smoking. Limit alcohol. I like Anastasia's limits better. 2 to 4 drinks a week. I'm not sure where that came from, but I'm above average in that regard. Processed foods, white flour, sugar, anything that comes in a box, generally you have to wonder about if it's gone through a factory. And avoid sweets or cut down on sweets, sweet drinks, including juice. People think juice is natural, but the sugar in it actually goes right to your bloodstream and causes that blood sugar seesaw that causes inflammation of your bloodstream, of your circulatory system. And trans fats you want to avoid. They're in a lot of baked goods. The way you can tell is read the label, and if it says hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated fats, those are trans fats, and any amount of them is bad for you. So choose your battles, but just be aware of the things that are good for you and the things that are not. Next slide. Healthy brain habits: laugh, watch funny movies, talk to people who are funny, socialize, as Anastacia talked about. Do what you can in these crazy times. Make phone calls, make Zoom calls, take walks with 6 feet between you and masks on. That's perfectly safe. And pray or meditate, whatever grounds you spiritually and is calming for you. Next slide. Diet is a big subject, but these are some basic guidelines. And focus on being good to your brain, not on deprivation. This is brain love. So think of it as doing something good for yourself, something nice for yourself, not focusing on the things you can't do. The main thing most of us can improve on is eating more produce, a good variety, a lot of colors on your plate, especially leafy greens, but any fruits and vegetables. Shoot for 2 or 3 per meal, and a minimum of 5 a day. Ideally would be even more than that, up to 10. Eat fish, has great fats and omega-3 fats in it. Try to have your carbohydrates be complex. Those can be legumes, whole grains, brown rice, quinoa. Sweet potatoes are a very healthy carbohydrate. You can have instead of your mashed potatoes or pasta. Try to have 3 servings of low-fat dairy a day. In general, just try to eat whole foods, things that you could pick or kill if you were a caveman. And green tea and dark chocolate have antioxidants, are great for you. Next slide. And supplements again: fish oil, B complex, D3, calcium for women. Men don't need calcium supplements, and it can cause actually cardiac problems, but women often need more of it. And vitamin C. And some more exotic ones in the fine print that there's mixed research on, but CoQ10, acetyl L-carnitine, pycnogenol, alpha GPC, phosphate or lysine, AAC, huperazine, saffron, and sage. Next slide. Any questions? I think we're about at our time.
We are good, actually. I think that your slides must have been just so clear for everybody that we're all set. So thank you so much. I really appreciate Diane, you and Anastasia's time today. I think this was a really great presentation and really timely for sure. So much appreciated. I do want to just remind everybody we are finishing our social and emotional well-being series next Friday, and we've got a presentation that's going to be kind of on what you can do with the internet to feel like you're connected to the broader world. So some ideas for some innovative and interesting online options for folks. And then we'll move into our long-term services and support series. So again, you can find all of those on our website, freed.org, freed.org. They're pretty easy to find there. And you can register for any of those that you're interested in. I want to talk about voting. In case you didn't know, it is election season. So the deadline to register to vote in order to cast a regular ballot this election is this Monday, October 19th. You still have time for a typical ballot, and you can register after that date. You can still cast a provisional ballot through election day, and it'll be counted if your registration is approved. So for more information, you can go to registertovote.ca.gov to register online today. And, you know, do you have a plan to vote, or do you need to know about what your voting options are, particularly in relation to disability? The Disability Organizing Network is holding a free training on developing a plan to vote on Wednesday, October 28th at 1 p.m. And you can go to freed.org/vote for more details on that, or you can always give us a call and we can get you connected. And finally, something really interesting and that's happening just this afternoon in about a half an hour is that Nevada County is holding an education workshop for voters with disabilities today at 2:30. You can email carl@freed.org, that's CARL@freed.org for the Zoom link in order to join that presentation today. It's not too late. This will be a great time to learn about what Nevada County is doing to help people with disabilities vote this election. And if you can't make the workshop today, we're going to air highlights from that on Disability Wrap, and that'll air on KVMR 89.5 FM, Nevada City, this Monday evening at 6:30. So if you're a Nevada County voter, particularly one with disabilities, that's a great resource for you. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciated your time today. We had a great attendee turnout, so we will plan to see a lot of you next Friday. Thanks.